All right, let's jump right in. There's a huge new regulation coming out of Brazil. And honestly, if you do any business there, this is something you absolutely cannot ignore. The clock is officially ticking, and we're going to break down everything you need to know. So let me ask you something. Just think about your company's tech stack for a second. Are you using cloud servers like AWS or Azure? How about marketing tools? Google, Meta, or maybe global HR systems like Workday? If you nodded your head to any of that, well then you're almost guaranteed to be transferring personal data out of Brazil. And guess what? That means this new law has your name written all over it. Okay, so first up, let's talk about what's at stake here. We're calling this Brazil's billion-dollar deadline, and you'll see why in just a second. All right, here's the timeline you need to circle on your calendar. Back on August 23rd, 2024, Brazil's data authority, they're called the ANPD, they dropped this new rule. They gave everyone a 1-year grace period to get their house in order. But that means the music stops on August 23rd, 2025. And let me be clear, this is not a suggestion. It's a hard deadline. And you do not want to get this wrong. The penalties are, well, they're staggering. We're talking about a potential fine of up to 50 million Brazilian reals. That's over 10 million US dollars. And get this, that's per violation. The financial hit here could be absolutely massive. Okay, so what even is a transfer under this new law? This brings us to a really important concept, the new data border. You have to understand what it means to move data across this invisible line. So an international data transfer, or IDT, is defined super broadly. This is key. It's not just, emailing a spreadsheet. It's any transmission, any sharing, heck, even just giving someone in another country remote access to a database counts. If data is in Brazil and someone outside Brazil can see it or touch it, it's a transfer. And here's where it gets really tricky. The reach of this law is huge. So yeah, obviously it applies when data goes from Brazil to another country. No surprise there. But get this. It also applies if data moves between two foreign countries, say from a US server to one in Ireland, if that data was first collected in Brazil. Wild, right? Plus, if you're processing data about people in Brazil, even if you're doing it somewhere else entirely, you're on the hook. This is a massive compliance trap that's going to catch a lot of companies off guard. So, how in the world are you supposed to comply with this? Well, that brings us to the most critical part of this whole conversation. There's one tool, one mechanism you absolutely have to use. We're calling it the unbreakable contract clause. Look, for the vast majority of companies out there, this all boils down to one thing. One single action item. You have to adopt Brazil's mandatory Standard Contractual Clauses, or SCCs for short, and bake them into your contracts. And this is a complete game changer. In the old days, you could kind of get by with some vague language. Maybe you'd borrow the EU's templates or argue legitimate interest. Well, throw all that out the window. That's all over. The new rule is a set of ironclad, unchangeable clauses straight from the ANPD. You don't get to edit them. You just have to use them as is. So why are these SCCs such a big deal? Well, the law technically mentions other ways to do this, like something called an adequacy decision. But here's the thing, they don't exist yet. The ANPD hasn't approved any countries. The other options like corporate rules take forever to get approved. So for all practical purposes, these SCCs are the only game in town. They're the one tool that's ready to go right now. Okay, let's make this real. Where are the biggest risks for your company? Because this isn't some abstract legal problem. Non-compliance is probably hiding in plain sight, right in your daily operations. I'd say there are 3 major red flag areas that apply to pretty much everyone. First, your cloud and infrastructure. Think AWS, Salesforce. Second, your marketing and analytics stack, Google, Meta. And third, your HR systems, things like Workday or SAP. Let's take cloud storage. It's super simple. If your data is sitting on a server outside of Brazil, boom, that's an international transfer. End of story. And that standard agreement you have with your cloud provider? Yeah, it's almost definitely not compliant anymore. Next up, marketing tools. This one is a minefield. Why? Because your partners are probably passing your data along to their partners. This is what's called an onward transfer. And under these new rules, if anyone in that chain messes up, you're the one who's on the hook. The liability flows all the way back to you. And finally, HR systems. This is a big one because we're talking about sensitive employee data here. Just having some vague internal corporate policy about data sharing for your global HQ or HR platform, that's not going to cut it anymore. Not even close. You need a rock-solid formal contract that includes these mandatory clauses. There's a quote that just nails this perfectly. It says, "The greatest risk you run is continuing to operate under the delusion that your legacy agreements provide sufficient coverage. They do not." Let that sink in. Your old contracts, they're basically worthless for this now. Okay, I know that all sounds a bit scary, but here's the good news. There's a clear path forward. Let's walk through your immediate action plan. It's just 3 simple steps. Step 1, map your data. You need to do an audit like yesterday. Find every single pathway where Brazilian personal data is leaving the country. Step 2, fix your contracts. You need to go through every single relevant vendor and internal agreement and insert these new unchangeable SCCs, no exceptions. And step 3, empower your DPO. Your data protection officer needs to own this. Task them with overseeing the whole project and getting it across the finish line. And why the big rush? Look, Brazil's data authority isn't just making these rules for the sake of it. They're actively gearing up for enforcement. This rule is a massive flashing sign that says we are looking at international transfers. This is their top priority, and you can bet they're ready to make an example out of someone. So I'll leave you with this one final thought. Your data is crossing Brazil's new border, probably every single day. The question is, when the regulators come calling, is your paperwork going to be ready?